All right, here's a lesson 11-4, the Supreme Court and civil rights, judicial action in the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s. The Warren Court especially being the most important here. Of course, the Warren Court and its major important ruling with the Brown versus the Board of Topeka of Education ruling in 1954 is where it really begins, but there's significant others that expand in civil rights and civil liberties and involve integration of schools, busing of students to make sure that the racial balance is more reflective of society, affirmative action, the rights of the accused, reproductive rights are all big here at this point in time, as well as some religious issues during this time. Significant topic to know some of these particular cases. Some key terms that were significant to the time period, especially segregation. There are different types of segregation. De jure segregation was basically your Jim Crow laws, black codes that are required by law, segregation of the races. There are other examples for other races, like in California with Asians as well. Various states establishing segregation and organization of the races economically, politically, by law. Then there's de facto segregation that just naturally, culturally, or economically happens. People settling in a particular area that is economically fitting to them. They're poor, they don't have a lot of money, so you live where you can live. Or you culturally just go ahead and move there so that into a particular place or location that is culturally similar to you, i.e. you might say Miami, Florida being a fitting place for Cubans coming to the United States. There's a lot of Spanish speaking going on there, and it is a easier transition as opposed to maybe moving to Minnesota, for example, right away. Judicial review is big in this particular topic here that we're covering, and it's a term that's old and ancient, goes back to about 1803, and that is the power to annul or nullify, if that sounds familiar, from a Southern point of view, states' rights point of view, all the way back to the Civil War, for example, and even before, to annul or nullify legislation or executive acts which the judges declare to be unconstitutional. This is the power that the Supreme Court and courts have. And there are some certain principles we have to know under the Marshall Court. That is the Chief Justice John Marshall, who significantly established this particular concept, and in a court case established the concept of judicial review. And basically in a previous court case, the Constitution was considered to be and emphasized as being the supreme law of the land. This is the time when there was some uncertainty as to who could do what, the Supreme Court, the various branches, and what the Constitution meant. The Constitution always followed when any conflict occurs with it and any other type of law at any level of government. The judicial branch is also the one which is going to be in charge of upholding the Constitution and can nullify laws that are considered to be unconstitutional. Some other pieces of the Constitution, and in particular amendments that are significant here in terms of understanding civil liberties and rights, are one, the Ninth Amendment. The Ninth Amendment was added and refers to those rights that aren't necessarily numbered specifically, enumerated specifically, listed specifically in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. Basically it says that if there's something here that is not necessarily specifically stated, it doesn't mean, or we shouldn't take that to construe, that those rights are denied to other people. They are retained by the people. And so that would be inferred or interpreted rights that aren't specifically word for word there. And a lot of the Warren Court cases involve that, with the First Amendment especially. All right, and so it's included in here to protect rights that aren't specifically in words stated, or maybe someday develop and aren't specifically there in words, but they're connected or implied to concepts and ideas. Question, or a little review here. Which amendment was the basis for the conflict between the federal government and the states over slavery in the territories in the 1850s and civil rights movement in the 1950s and 1960s? Let's see, 13th Amendment bans slavery, 14th Amendment sets up due process clause, equal protection of the laws, Reconstruction Amendment, 15th Amendment is going to protect voting rights for those of a particular racial background. That would be the 10th Amendment that says anything that is not specifically denied to the federal government or given to the federal government is reserved for the states and or the people. Very similar to the 9th Amendment in a sense. It's a way of keeping the power down toward the bottom, and our conservative Republicans today would very much voice that kind of a concern and opinion. Some Democrats as well. But the conservative side of the world that doesn't want to see the government power of the government grow will be definitely in favor of that. That goes back to the Civil War era and the Reconstruction era and the 1950s, resistance to the civil rights legislation of the 50s and the 60s. The 10th Amendment here again stated so you can see it. I believe you have it in your outline notes. Very significant amendment. The Warren Court, Chief Justice Earl Warren is appointed to the Chief Justice position to the court by Eisenhower in the 1950s. Eisenhower regrets that later on because Eisenhower is a conservative. Warren turns out to issue some very liberal rulings here, and his court is one of the two most formative important in history. John Marshall, early in the course of U.S. history, being the most important, Marshall kind of sets the basis and the tone for things, but Warren is really known for personal rights, First Amendment rights, civil liberties, and expanding and detailing those things in the various cases you're studying and reading about. Brown versus the Board of Topeka of Education in 1954 is the most important, or is most important, significant, and beginning one, and then the others you're looking at will expand upon that. Of course, this gets rid of, declares that separation of the races is inherently unequal. Interesting to note here that Chief Justice Earl Warren was a governor of California and ruled as governor and supported the relocation of Japanese into internment camps during World War II. So a little bit of contrast there. But times, context, all matter here. There are some reapportionment decisions that go on at this point in time in history as well, and there's actually some new news on that here in the present day in the year 2015 that clarifies exactly how voting districts can be established and set up. And the court in this particular case challenged some practices that were going on in Congress that would create some funny districts to try and create an advantage in an election for one party or another. And basically, it establishes a ruling in a particular case that says one person should be given one vote, and it requires that states redraw their voting districts for a balanced, equal representation of things for the United States Congress check by the Supreme Court in this case. Equal populations, equal representatives. More on that a little bit later in some future review. Basically, this decision was based on the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment that said there must be equal apportionment of districts for equal representation. Right now, you're looking at the Supreme Court case analysis matrices. Make sure you complete those on the website with the analysis sheets that are there for you. Have that ready to go next class, and that'll be graded for you, and that'll be the end of our lesson. We'll quiz on it a little bit later. Good day.